Bard on the Plains podcast with Mike McPeak. It's about stories, mine and yours.
As I create this episode, our internet is down. My wife and I are irritated because this is the center of all of our entertainment. We stream music, do Facebook and Twitter, and get our television over the internet. The video games I play require a connection to authenticate. If you don't have music or books downloaded, you're out of luck. There is FM radio, but that seems so primitive. So it's times like this I look back and reflect, because there's not a whole else to do, on how things used to be and how we got along. On the farm, we got our TV from an antenna because cable had not been invented yet. We had an aerial on the roof of the house. We could get 3 channels reliably, CBS, NBC, and PBS. If we got up on the roof and fiddled with the antenna, we might be able to get the ABC affiliate, but that also depended upon the vagaries of atmospheric conditions. There was no video on demand then, so if you wanted to watch a show, you had to be in front of this big box in your living room at the appointed time. Closest you could get to a DVR back then was the summer rerun season. There was a joke that the networks would record all their shows on the tape for the first half of the year, and then take them off, replay them during the summer. All the shows would premiere in the fall, and it was always an extravaganza. Each network would have a special with their big stars, getting us all hyped up about the new shows that were coming this fall and promoting the returning shows. And then there were the perennial specials and movies. I always looked forward to watching Wizard of Oz every October. Even though I knew Dorothy would make it back to Annie M, spoilers, I still eagerly anticipated it and would always tear up when she was saying her goodbyes. It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, Peanuts Christmas Special, The Grinch, and Frosty the Snowman were our can't-miss shows. Nice to see that at least some things don't change. One tradition that has gone by the wayside is Saturday morning cartoons. With the rise of Cartoon Network's Boomerang and Nicktoons, cartoon shows have all but disappeared. With political correctness and changing standards, cartoons aren't what they used to be. No more Wile E. Coyote trying to catch the Roadrunner with ever-increasing bizarre and deadly contraptions, or Elmer Fudd singing Killed Wabbit to the tune of Wagner's Ride of the Valkyrie. I mean, really, this was where I was exposed to the most classical music. With appointment television, that meant certain nights meant certain shows. Saturday night was the Lawrence Welk Show. For us in South Dakota, this show was something special. Mr. Welk was from North Dakota and played many places throughout the Midwest, including the room above my mom's uncle's building in Willow Lake. And with Myron Florin, the Happy Norwegian, his band director and accordion player, was from Roslyn, South Dakota. And even though my musical tastes were moving towards that hippie music, I could still appreciate some of what was played on the show. There was also Hee Haw that was a little closer to my taste than Lawrence Welk. With its mix of corny jokes and sketches, musical performances, and memorable characters, it was always fun to watch. Because of its country theme and values, we related to many of the people on the show. My mom met Gunilla Hutton at a American Cancer Society convention once, and I can still recall when I heard that David Stringbean Aikman and his wife had been murdered. Sunday nights were always Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. The host Marlin Perkins and his assistant Jim Fowler would take us on animal adventures all over the world. The joke was that Marlin would stay in the studio and narrate while Jim was out there getting mauled by some wild animal. After that would be the wonderful world of Disney. I had a hit-and-miss relationship with this show. If they played the fun and happy stuff, that was fine, but sometimes they would put on tearjerkers, which I didn't care for, and I still don't. Variety shows were also a staple back then. I could watch Sonny and Cher or the Smothers Brothers and hear some of that rock music that kids these days were listening to. And of course there was Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In with its quirky characters and subversive sketches that had an important part on forming my sense of humor. So you can blame them. And there is a South Dakota connection to the show. Gary Owens, the announcer with one hand over his ear, was from Mitchell. The hardware back then was different from what we have now. There wasn't these small flat screens that you could put anywhere in the house or tablets or phones to watch on. TVs were actual pieces of furniture. The first one I remember was about 3.5 feet tall and 2 feet wide. I hope these measurements are accurate because I have found that the way I remember things and the way they actually were varies a lot because everything was bigger when I was smaller. This was a black and white TV. It took up floor space and therefore was a suitable place to place photos, decorations, or potted plants. At the very least, it would have a lace doily on top to dress it up. The next TV we got was one of them fancy ones with color. Later, I would see some real fancy ones that had a record player and radio built into it. This was one of the first entertainment centers. I can remember when it was delivered. TVs were actually delivered and set up back then. Wes Hill had a small building out in the country where he sold and serviced televisions. TVs were expensive back then, and when it quit working, you didn't go out and get a new one. You would have a serviceman come to your house with tools, testers, and his box of tubes to fix it. No integrated circuits here, just glass tubes of various shapes and sizes with pins sticking out of one end to plug into a board. You could look through the glass and see all the wires and doodads that make it work. Sometimes the tubes would need replacing, other times it just needed to be reseated. As the TV and I got older, I started to do things to keep it working. I never messed with the tubes, but I would mess with the adjustments on the back. There were controls for fine-tuning, brightness, contrast, and horizontal and vertical hold adjustments. As the TV got older, the horizontal and vertical hold adjustments would start to be problematic. If the horizontal hold was off, the picture would start to scrunch together, and the vertical hold would cause your picture to scroll up to the point where the bottom half of the picture would be at the top of the screen and the top half at the bottom. And as it got worse, it continually scrolled up, so it was always rolling to the top of the screen nonstop. It was on this color TV that, as a growing child, I was exposed to the world in a way that my siblings weren't at that age. I remember sitting in front of the TV on a hot July day watching the first man set foot on the moon in real time. I can also remember annoying my folks by staying up until 2 o'clock in the morning watching a film about Paul McCartney and Wings' concert tour called Wings Over America. That was filmed during America's bicentennial year of 1976. My dad got irritated with me because the living room was right next to their bedroom with only a curtain to separate the two. I sat as close to the TV as I could and had the sound as low as it would go, but it was still too loud. But it also brought a somber reality with it. I have vague recollections of Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King being assassinated. The Vietnam War marched into our living room, and I saw people who could be my distant relatives fighting each other as I watched the Irish Republican Army of Northern Ireland perform acts of terrorism against Ireland and the British Commonwealth. I saw Watergate and Nixon impeachment trial take place before my eyes. I watched as the civil rights movement continued to grow and try to find its legs. I remember images of Woodstock, hippies, and flower power, and tried to figure out what it meant. This was a lot for someone who wasn't even a teenager yet to comprehend. I'm sure this has colored the way that I see the world even to this day. As I got older, I became more obsessed with getting a TV in my room. I was entering my teenage years and didn't always want to watch what the folks were watching, and they didn't exactly care for some of the nonsense that I liked. My first attempt at this was an old black and white TV that a neighbor of ours was getting rid of. It was old and rather problematic. The vertical hold was shot, so I would always fiddle with the buttons in the back. I took the back off and tried to make sure the tubes were tight. I learned a good lesson while doing this. I was trying to adjust the vertical hold, so I blindly reached behind to adjust it while watching the screen to see what was going on. I accidentally touched one of the tubes and got a pretty good zap up my arm. It smarted for quite a while. So kids, never screw with electricity. Next, I finally got the money to buy a small portable TV for my room. It was black and white and only had bunny ears for antennas, so I could only get CBS and NBC shows, but it was still nirvana to me. I could watch Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show when he was at the peak of his career. I was also able to watch Tom Schneider on The Late Late Show. He would sit there and smoke with a cigarette because smoking hadn't become a social taboo like it is now, and interview his guests. I remember watching him interview Wendy O. Williams when the punk rock scene was just starting to take off. Seeing him as a fish out of water but soldiering on with that interview still sticks with me. When I graduated and went to Watertown to attend Lake Area Vocational Technical Institute, now just known as Lake Area Technical Institute, I was finally exposed to cable TV. Not only was there a lot of channels, but there was a lot of variety. MTV was taking off. It was hard for me to imagine a channel that played music videos of music that I liked. HBO was becoming a thing. Not only could you watch movies in your home and not have the naughty bits cut out, but you could see all kinds of specials like the one with this hyped-up guy called Robin Williams, looking like he was having a manic episode on the stage as he careened breakneck speeds from one bit to another as the audience sat there and thought, what is happening here? Alas, I graduated and went back to the farm with our short handfuls of TV stations. Eventually, rural cable was finally introduced. This used a special microwave antenna that had to have a line of sight to the tower. It was only about 15 channels, but it was a step up from where we had been. When we were lambing and I stayed up till 3 o'clock in the morning to keep an eye on the sheep, having something to watch was a godsend, because at that time broadcast TV channels would sign off for the night. Another innovation in entertainment that made farm life easier was the VCR. When video cassettes started to become a thing, there were places in town that would rent you a movie and the machine to watch it with. VCRs were quite expensive yet, and not everyone could afford one, but you could rent one and a couple movies for a couple days, and then take them back the next time you went to town. And remember, be kind and rewind. Eventually, VCRs came down in price, so we could afford one of our very own. But what if you got tired of renting movies and wanted to watch them anytime you liked? Enter Columbia House Movie Club. For just $1 you could get your first movie, and then you only had to buy one movie every month at the regular price. There would also be a specially selected movie that would be automatically sent to you unless you responded to them that you did not want this, otherwise it would be billed to your account. We quit farming and moved to town, so now we had cable all the time. But the next big thing was the ability to download and stream movies. Now you didn't have to make a trip down to the movie rental place, hope they had something that you would watch and haven't seen already, and wasn't out of the store for rental, and then have to return it when you got done. Now you could sit in your pajamas, scan through a wide selection of movies, not have to worry about the one you want to watch is out, and you can still sit there and grumble about there's nothing good to watch. Well, I see the internet is back up, and life can get back to normal. At least the normal we now know.
If you have a story you'd like to tell, contact Mike on Twitter at BardOnThePlains or by email at bardontheplains@gmail.com. For more information about the stories in this podcast, visit bardontheplains.com.